All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into, the book of Amos, chapters 7 through 9. And we're working with some pretty intense academic excerpts here. But trust me, it's going to be anything but dry and dusty. We're talking justice, accountability, and finding hope in some pretty unexpected places.
One of the things that always strikes me about these chapters is the imagery. I mean, you've got locusts, fire, even a builder's plumb line. And it's not just about shock value or anything. It's about getting us to really think about the consequences of our actions, not just as individuals, but as a whole of society.
Yeah, and Amos the prophet delivering these messages, he doesn't exactly sugarcoat things. I mean, he's calling out the Israelites pretty directly for straying from their path. But it's interesting because he's not just like pointing fingers. He's actually pleading with God for mercy on their behalf, which I think is a powerful reminder that even when we're holding people accountable, there's always room for compassion.
Right. It's like even in the midst of all this judgment, there's this underlying current of mercy, I guess you could say.
Right.
And it suggests that divine justice, well, it's not just about punishment. It's about a call to come back to what's right, to kind of realign ourselves with a higher standard, I guess.
And speaking of standards, that's where that plumb line image comes in.
Oh, absolutely. That's not just some random symbol. It's a powerful one.
I mean, think about it. A plumb line makes sure a building is straight, it's stable, it's true, and Amos is using it to measure the righteousness of the Israelites. And, well, let's just say they don't exactly measure up.
Yeah, it's like he's holding up this cosmic building code, you know? And he's basically saying that societies, they can become just as crooked and unstable as a building if they're not built on a foundation of, justice and righteousness.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what are the plumb lines we're using in our own lives, in our communities?
Right, exactly. Are we building something that's truly straight and true?
So we've got these pronouncements of judgment, these calls for righteousness. And then Amos runs into Amaziah, the priest of Bethel. And things get pretty intense.
Oh, yeah.
Amaziah basically tells Amos to get lost, accuses him of treason even.
It's a classic case of speaking truth to power. And, the backlash that often comes with it.
Right.
Amos is challenging the status quo, all those comfortable assumptions of the people in charge, and they're not happy about it.
Not one bit. But here's what I find so interesting about Amos. He wasn't, some high-ranking priest or anything. It wasn't about fame or fortune for him.
No.
He was a shepherd, a farmer, someone who just felt this incredible compulsion to deliver these messages, no matter the cost.
It's powerful, isn't it? Reminds us that we don't need some fancy title or position to speak truth, to stand up for what's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most impactful voices are the ones that come from people who are just driven by that deep sense of conviction.
Yeah.
People who are willing to speak out even when it's uncomfortable, unpopular.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something we can all relate to on some level.
Right.
Those moments where we feel called to speak up, to stand for something, even if it means going against the grain. What matters is that we're aligned with what we believe is right.
Oh, totally. It's about having that moral compass, that internal plumb line, I guess you could say, that guides us even when everything around us is trying to pull us in a different direction.
Exactly.
It's about finding that courage to act on our convictions, even when it's hard.
Yeah, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about this, this image of the plumb line, this call for righteousness. But then in Amos chapter 8, things take a bit of a darker turn, you could say, with this vision of a basket of ripe fruit. I mean, on the surface, it sounds kind of harmless, right?
Yeah.
But like everything else in Amos, there's definitely a deeper meaning here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That basket of fruit, it represents Israel. And that ripeness, it's a symbol of the nation's readiness for judgment. And it's a pretty chilling image when you think about it. Like, the time for warnings is over. The consequences, they're right there at the doorstep. And God's message in this chapter, it's pretty stark. The end has come upon my people, Israel. I will spare them no longer.
Whoa. Yeah, that's heavy stuff. But what really got to me in this chapter? It was this image of scarcity, and it's not just about like a lack of food or water. It's a scarcity of God's word. People are described as like staggering from place to place, searching for the word of the Lord, but they will not find it.
That whole idea of a spiritual famine, it really resonates with me, especially in our modern world. I mean, think about it. We're bombarded with information,
Yeah.
opinions, distractions all the time. But how much of it is actually nourishing?
Yeah.
How much of it really connects us to something, something deeper, something beyond, just the surface level
It's
stuff.
like we're drowning in information, but starving for wisdom, right? We're constantly scrolling,
Yeah.
clicking, consuming, but are we actually like learning, growing,
Yeah.
evolving? And Amos's warning about this spiritual famine, it feels incredibly relevant today, maybe even more so than in his own time.
I think you're right. It makes you think. Like, how often do we find ourselves feeling empty, restless, anxious even, despite being, constantly connected, constantly stimulated? Maybe it's because we're not feeding our souls. We're not engaging with those things that truly matter, the things that give us...
Meaning? Right, exactly. And this isn't just some abstract philosophical concept either. This famine, it has real world consequences. It impacts our relationships, our communities, our sense of well-being. If we're not careful, we can end up spiritually malnourished, unable to tell the difference between truth and falsehood, unable to connect with others in a meaningful way.
Exactly. And that brings us to Amos chapter 9, the final chapter of this prophetic book. And it starts off pretty bleak, to be honest. God declares, not one will escape, not one will get away. It paints this picture of inevitable judgment, inescapable consequences.
Wow. But wait a minute. Isn't this kind of a complete shift from the message of hope that we saw earlier? How do we reconcile these two seemingly contradictory ideas?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because even in the midst of this seemingly hopeless situation, a glimmer of light appears. Just when we think all is lost, Amos offers this surprising twist. He reveals God's plan for restoration, a plan that goes beyond just forgiving past transgressions.
Oh, okay. Now I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this twist. What does this restoration actually look like? How does it all play out?
Well, God speaks of rebuilding the fallen tent of David, of bringing his people back from exile, of planting them firmly in their land so that they will never again be uprooted. It's a vision of renewal, of a future where God's people are not only forgiven, but also restored to a place of even greater blessing than before.
So it's not just going back to how things were before. It's something bigger, something, more transformative.
Right, exactly. It's not just about returning to a physical land. It's about a spiritual homecoming, I guess you could say. It's about renewing that covenant between God and his people, a deepening of their relationship.
But how does this ancient story, this promise of restoration, connect with us today? What does it mean for those of us who aren't living in exile, who aren't, waiting for a physical return to a promised land?
Well, I think that's the beauty of these ancient texts, isn't it? You speak to something universal, something that transcends, time and place, this vision of restoration. It speaks to that deep longing within each of us for healing, a return to a sense of right relationship
With ourselves.
with each other and with the divine.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all ties together now. We've got these warnings about straying from the path, about the consequences of injustice and spiritual emptiness. But then there's this incredible promise of hope, this vision of a future where things are made right, where brokenness is healed, where we're restored to a place of, even greater blessing.
And I think that's the key takeaway here, isn't it? That even when we mess up, even when we feel lost and far from where we're supposed to be, there's always a possibility of redemption, renewal. It's never too late to turn back, to realign ourselves with those plumb lines of justice, righteousness, compassion.
Yeah. This has been a pretty intense deep dive, but also incredibly insightful. We've explored some challenging concepts: judgment, accountability, the consequences of straying from our path. But we've also encountered this powerful message of hope, this reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always the possibility of
restoration,
a new beginning.
That's what's so great about engaging with these ancient texts.
Yeah.
They challenge us, they provoke us, they make us uncomfortable at times, but they also offer us profound wisdom, guidance, and ultimately hope.
So if Amos were speaking to us today, what would he say? What plumb lines would he use to measure our actions and choices? What would he challenge us to build, to restore, to reclaim in our own lives and in our world?
That's a great question. It's worth pondering. Maybe he'd urge us to examine our own hearts, to assess the buildings we're constructing in our lives. Are they built on a foundation of justice, compassion, integrity, or are we cutting corners, sacrificing our values for the sake of uh, convenience, comfort,
Yeah.
or personal gain?
Those are some tough questions, but also incredibly important ones. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. As we wrap up this deep dive into Amos, I encourage you to keep those questions in mind. Reflect on what resonates with you, what challenges you, what inspires you to build a life that's aligned with your deepest values, a life that's truly free. Stranger, until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning.